I'm Norwood, Holland, Treasurer for the Mid-Atlantic Book Publishers Association. As part of our webcast series, today we'll be speaking with Peter Bowerman, author of The Well-Fed Self-Publisher. This is a great book, and I recommend it for anyone who's starting out as publishing. Today, Peter will be discussing the marketing mindset. So, also I have to make some apologies. We were supposed to do a side-by-side interview on Skype, but there were some technical difficulties. So you won't see me during the interview, but you will see him, and I'll return at the end. So let's get started. This is the Mid-Atlantic Book Publishers Association's web series on publishing. And today I'm speaking with Peter Bowerman. Peter was a 15-year sales and marketing pro when he started his freelance commercial writing practice in 1994. He is the author of the critically acclaimed Well-Fed Writer titles, including the original 2000 Book of the Month Club edition and the quadruple award-winning 2010 update. The books are how-to standards on the subject of lucrative freelance commercial writing. In 2007, he released the double award-winning title, The Well-Fed Self-Publisher, How to Turn One Book into a Full-Time Living. The book is a detailed step-by-step chronicle of the successful self-publishing endeavors. And by successful, we mean more than 100,000 copies of his books and ebooks in circulation, and a full-time living for over a decade. He has published over 300 articles, leads seminars on writing and publishing, and is a professional coach for commercial writing and self-publishing ventures. Peter, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, this talk is based on Chapter 2 of your book, Learning to Love Sales and Marketing. When you suggested this title to me, it sounded too much like general book marketing. But after some discussion, I realized that it's not that at all. How is this different from book marketing in general, and why do you feel it's so important a topic?
Because when you first said, oh, well, John Kremer's going to be talking about book marketing, I said, no, this is really a very different thing, and it's actually a very complementary thing to what John's going to be talking about. What we'll be discussing today is what you might think of as the sort of the precursor to book marketing. Call it the tilling of the mental soil, in a sense. If the idea of sales and marketing confuses you, confounds you, or even terrifies you, I suppose, then how effective a book marketer are you going to be? So this is all about developing sort of the marketing mindset in a hopefully relatively painless fashion so that you can start viewing sales and marketing as a powerful tool, not some scary, undefined thing that makes you break out in a cold sweat when you hear it. In my experience, so many creative type people, you say sales or you say marketing, and they're running for the exits. It's just something that they don't want to do. They don't know how to do it, and the fear of the unknown is very powerful, and it can be very immobilizing. So that's really, having had a 15 years sales and marketing background before I even started my writing business, and that started with selling books door to door when I was in college. I had a few, I learned some distinctions around what this stuff means, and how it really isn't that scary when you understand it. So that's kind of the medium-length answer, I guess.
Okay. You have an interesting take on the purpose of writing, one you talk about in your book. So let's ask the question, why do we write anything?
It's a good question. So, when I do workshops, I usually commercial writing workshops, but it could just as well apply to self-publishing seminars where you're having to get people's attention with press releases and pitches to wholesalers and writing conferences, whatever it may be, I'll ask people, why do we write anything? And of course, you get all of the standard expected answers, things like to inform, to educate, to touch, to amuse, to just all of the stuff that you usually hear. And I'm going to probably refer every now and then to my book as well. To entertain, to motivate. There's any number of things. And so I say, this is all good, but how about this? Why we write anything is to have it be read. And they all laugh and they go, oh, please, they roll, they throw their hands up in the air. And yet, when you stop and think about it, that is the purpose. You can't get to any of the other stuff, informing, educating, moving, touching, whatever, until someone reads it. So, so that's really kind of, that was the point of that chapter, and the point of today is to sort of help you, help people get more comfortable with writing stuff that'll get read, because that's really the point. If you're trying to have an event, or you're trying to get your book on a shelf, or you're trying to get your book reviewed, then you need to speak in a certain way to the people, those gatekeepers, in ways that they can hear.
Okay. Since the term marketing strikes such fear in so many creative people's heart, why don't you share your definition, of far less intimidating one, of marketing?
Okay. So, again, you say marketing, people go, ah! And
Yes.
I boil it down to really the essence. And, this is in the book, and as a quote, successful marketing of a book simply means letting the world know you're out there in a variety of ways, on a consistent basis, and with a message that they can hear through the clutter. Okay? So, it's when you buy something, if you buy a book, if you go see a movie, it's because someone marketed something to you and it resonated with you. And it's really not more complicated than that. It's a lot of work, no question, but it's not more complicated than just letting the world know you're out there in a variety of ways, on a consistent basis, and with a message that they can hear through the clutter. And I wrote that back in 2006, 2007, and of course the clutter has gotten a lot worse since then. And so it's even more important that you get very specific and very clear about who you are and what you're doing.
So why do you think marketing is so difficult for so many people?
Well, and as discussed, it scares a lot of creative people, and it scares a lot of everybody, because many of us have some negative associations around sales. Who hasn't been called by a telemarketer, interrupting their dinner? Who hasn't, bought a car, and had to deal with a car salesman, or maybe a timeshare salesman, or maybe somebody coming door to door? And so, when that is your primary exposure to the whole idea of sales, you can easily develop the idea of, well, that's not anything I want to be a part of, okay? And I think, so that'll kind of stop people in their tracks. So, but it's like anything else, and I think everybody out there has had certain fears in their life, and those fears loomed bigger and bigger until they finally dealt with them. And I would say in most cases, when you deal with a certain fear, you're going to walk out the other side going, well, that wasn't that big a deal. Why did I get so freaked out about it when it was just, in other words, we make something far more scary and difficult than it really is. And so I thought it was important to include a chapter in my book, and important to, have this as a topic, because it really is. It's about getting your mind right about a subject that can be, can have a lot of misperceptions and misconceptions. So.
Okay.
Oh, and also, let me just add, we're also taught to be modest, not to toot our horns. I mean, how many times have we heard that? It's just kind of don't, stand up too much, whatever. And really, frankly, if you're gonna write a book, modesty doesn't have any place, fortunately or unfortunately, in the book marketing world. And if you feel like what you've created is worthwhile, it's a worthwhile contribution to the fiction world, or it's a worthwhile contribution to some how-to subject, which doesn't have, perhaps the type of information that your book offers, then there's no need to be modest. Why should you not be modest about something that you've created that's very useful and that can make a valuable contribution, even if it's just to be an escape in the case of a novel, or something like that. So that's I think also a reason why there's an aversion, to sales and marketing. So
that's also a good segue into the next question. What would you say to the scared of marketing types? People who claim they are not salespeople and don't want to be salespeople.
I'd say good, because this isn't about being a salesperson. That's the thing. The hardcore sale, the kind of obnoxious approach, doesn't work and isn't what people want. When you're trying to, sales is really, and marketing, and really the terms are very similar. Sales is generally more associated with a direct face-to-face kind of interaction, and marketing is generally a more kind of an awareness building sort of function. But in both cases, you're just trying to find those people whose needs and hopes and fears and aspirations, whatever, are addressed by what you have to offer. Period. I don't want to sell to somebody who doesn't, need or want my book, and those people are going to self-select themselves out, of the process. But but I'm looking for those people, in the case of the well-fed writer, I'm looking for, that person who, there's any number of audiences, but, the key audience is, that writer who isn't making a lot of money, as a writer, and wow, there's this field called commercial writing, that you can make really good money. So, I'm addressing that need for them to have a better quality of life and more fulfillment and, more money and, da-da-da-da. Person who, is happy in their job, they're not going to care about my book, and that's fine. So I just urge people to, understand that you're just trying to reach those people who have, who resonate, who would resonate with your product or could potentially resonate with your product. So,
in your book, you outline what you consider to be 3 fundamental principles of sales and marketing. Before we get into them individually, can you tell us a little about why they're so important?
So this comes from my sales days, and in the course of one self-publishing journey, you're going to have a lot of audiences whose attention you need to get. You're going to have bookstores, you're going to have event planners, you're going to have readers, you're going to have wholesalers, you're going to have reviewers, and these principles can help you more effectively reach those particular audiences with the messages that they need to hear in the way that they need to hear it. And and that may sound complicated, but as you'll see, we're already doing this. We've been doing this our whole life. My point is to help people become more conscious of that process. So that's the first kind of aha is, okay, I already do this thing, so now it's a matter of identifying, and instead of being unconscious about it, consciously putting those those tools to work. So.
Okay, so let's go through these three fundamental principles. Tell us about the first one, which is who's the audience?
Who's the audience? So, as a commercial freelancer writing for companies, the first question when I start a project is who's the audience? Because how I'm going to write that particular piece is going to depend on who I'm speaking with. That's pretty obvious. When I'm in when I'm in workshops and stuff, I'll say, okay, to define this point. When you were a kid, did you speak to your parents the same way you spoke to your best friend? And people would laugh, well, of course not. Do you speak to your bosses the same way you speak to your coworkers? No. Do you speak to your girlfriend in the car the same way as you speak to the cop who just pulled you over, for speeding or whatever? We're always adjusting our speaking to our audience. Because, if you're trying to convince friends to, let's go see a movie this afternoon, you're going to start selling them all the benefits of, let's get out of the house. And I know you guys have been talking about how much you really, wanted to see this movie. And it's such a hot day, nice cool theater. So you're going to speak in the language that it's going to take to get them to do what you want them to do. And we all do this. So it's just a matter of, instead of just having it run on autopilot and have us not be aware of it, you're actually, being more conscious of it. I kind of hinted at this before. When you buy something that you first saw in an ad, it's because something in that ad spoke to you and to some need or desire or hope or fear or whatever. If you're buying a big screen TV, well, at some point you probably saw an ad somewhere, or you saw it demonstrated, you're thinking of sports season and watching the games and the big screen, and if you're a woman, maybe it's there's a certain type of clothing line or a certain perfume line or a certain kind of shoe they know how to speak to people to get you to take action. So that's what good advertising and promotional material does. And given how downright lousy so much book promotion material is, and often coming from big publishing houses, material that just doesn't consider the audience or any of the other factors we'll discuss. Frankly, it's not that hard to get this right, if you do some, certain things. So I would always ask, people to ask themselves when they're writing a press release, when they're writing a book promotion blurb, when they're writing their back cover copy, when they're writing, anything, even at the title of their book, who's the audience? How am I, and how's the best way to get their attention?
Okay. So we want to consider the audience. Now let's get into the second one, the features and benefits equation.
The features and benefits equation. So this is a classic sales cornerstone, and let's get into some basic definitions. Features, in the case of the book world, are about an author and its book. Peter Bowerman is a freelance commercial writer and the author of The Well-Fed Writer, Okay, so that's about me. Benefits are about the things that are important to a reader and how the book addresses those things. So, give you a good example. I'm going to read from my book here real quick, but so imagine, you come across a blurb that says, Peter Bowerman leveraged his sales and marketing career into a new career in the lucrative field of commercial writing, and then he wrote a book about it. That book covers X, Y, Z, blah, 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 blah. How interesting is that? Not very.
Right.
Okay? Yeah, because it's all about me.
Yes.
Okay? And this is the thing people, I know we joke as a society, it's all about me. Well, it better not be all about you, or you're not going to sell any books. Okay, so how about this as an alternative? There's this lucrative field called commercial writing where you can make the kind of money i.e. $50 to $125 an hour, you've always dreamed of. A field that can provide great income while letting you work from home, have more time for life, loved ones, and leisure. A field that gives you the opportunity to finally fulfill your dreams of being a writer for a living. How's that sound? I mean, because that's talking to some, things that... Now, notice I haven't said a word about me yet, or the book. It's just like I'm setting up this premise of this thing, and so at that point, they're like, yeah, okay, sounds good, keep going. Then I can say, and it just so happens that Peter Bowerman, a seasoned commercial writer, has written an award-winning book on the subject, providing all the how-to detail you need to get your own personal commercial freelancing show on the road. So that's an example of features versus benefits. Some years back here in Atlanta, when Bell South was still around, and I miss those days sometimes. But anyway, so they had a whole series of ads that were very technology oriented. I mean, there was these very stylized images of technology and data and routers and, this kind of patina, cool, technology was cool. And somebody woke up one day and realized, no one cares about technology. All they care about is how that technology makes their life better, richer. So people don't care about, when cell phones first came out, it wasn't that people were so enamored with all the features. It was, wow, I'm not locked down to a place anymore. I can be anywhere and people can reach me. Parents, gave their kids phones because now they know that there's some security. They know where their kids are and what they're doing. So those are the things that speak to people about buying products, not this feature or that feature. Those things are cool, but more often they're cool. The purpose of them being cool is that it makes that person cool, and that's a benefit. So it isn't the features per se; it's what the features buy you. So. Give you a good example. Some years back, and I talked about this example in my book, it was kind of a funny story. There's this author named Mark Levine. Anyway, doesn't matter. He wrote a book. He was actually a marketing guy as well as a magician. And he wrote a book called Tricks with Your Head. And it was 150 tricks that you could do using your head as a prop. So he was represented by a big, Madison Avenue big publishing company in New York, and they came up with this press release with the positively scintillating headline, "New book, tricks with your head." Well, they got 0 traction with that. Nobody wanted any more information. And this, by the way, is kind of the dirty secret of the publishing world, is that oftentimes promotional materials by some of the big companies are being written by junior people who really don't have any sense of, how to write something effectively. And yet, so just because you're with a big publishing company doesn't mean they're going to get it right. So anyway, he and his partner who had written the book together, they decided to rewrite this press release. And they changed the title of the press release to How to Stick a Fork in Your Eye and Why You'd Want to. And they got 150 requests for radio interviews. Okay? So now you could argue that it wasn't that they pointed out, specifically the benefits of something, but in essence they did, because they came at it from a very unique creative perspective, and that showed that touched that journalist's need to have something new and different and whatever. So in essence, it did speak to that person's desire. What's going to get that person's attention? Something different, and that was about as different as it gets. So just keep that in mind. The kind of the way to remember it is begin with benefits, follow with features. Begin with benefits. benefits followed with features. So start out when you're talking about what's in it for that other person versus, about the book. For instance, my first book was called The Well-Fed Writer, okay? I could have called it The Freelance Writing Guide, which would have been about as interesting as a bowl of cold oatmeal, okay? But The Well-Fed Writer, even if people don't know exactly what that means, they know that it has something to do with making good money as a writer. So there's a benefit in that title for that reader. And then my subtitle was Financial Self-Sufficiency as a Freelance Writer, or actually a commercial freelancer. Freelance Writer was the first edition, and then I changed it slightly for the updated edition. Financial Self-Sufficiency as a Commercial Freelancer in 6 months or less. Well, there's another benefit. I'm talking to them about what they can accomplish and in what timetable. So keep those things in mind when you're creating materials. Think about your reader first, and then once you get their attention, then you can start talking about yourself and your credentials and all that stuff. So.
And that brings us to the third principle, the USP, the unique selling proposition. Tell us about that.
So the unique selling proposition, this is something that is sort of a staple in the business world. In corporate America, you'll hear USP being tossed around, quite a bit. And it's kind of what it sounds like. It's what is different. When a company is trying to determine a USP, it's like, okay, what do we do differently than other companies? Or, and this is important, what are we doing that may not be different than other companies, but nobody else is claiming it? Okay? And if we can claim it, then we're going to win. So there's that great story of Schlitz beer and how Schlitz beer was, number 5 in the country back around the early 1900s. And someone came up with the idea of explaining the process of how they make the beer. And so they laid it out, and so they're talking about all of these high-quality ingredients that go into the beer. And any of the other beer companies could have said, well, we're doing the same thing. There's nothing different about that. But they were the ones who, seized on it and made it kind of a unique selling proposition. And as a result, they went from number 5 to number 1 inside of a year. I mean, it was a huge jump. So ask yourself, what does my book, do differently than other books? When I was first thinking of coming out with The Well-Fed Writer, I went to the bookstore, and this is kind of in the early days of Amazon, but I went to the bookstore to see how many other books there were on the subject of commercial freelance writing. There's a million books on freelance writing in general, about for newspapers, magazines, whatever. But how many books about writing freelance for companies? And I found one book on the subject. It was a good book, and it was the book that got me started in the business. And so I thought, okay, there's only one book on the subject. There's plenty of room for another one, especially one, in my case, that takes a different and more fun, lively approach to the subject. And in fact, I went to the guy, and he's a friend of mine today. I went to the guy who wrote that first one, and I asked him if he could blurb my book. Why not? The worst you can say is no. And, by this point, this guy had written something like 50 books. He was making $1 gazillion a year. It was no skin off his nose to give me a nice blurb. And he said, I'd be happy to. And he wrote this blurb that was the best, information on commercial writing he had ever read. I wondered whether that meant he actually hadn't read his own book, so he could actually claim that it was the best, information that he read. So, but still, it ended up selling me a lot of books. So, but yeah. So, what is, what do you do differently with your book, and drive those points home, or drive home the point that other people aren't driving home about their books.
So really, it seems like you took his book to a different level, to another level. That's
yeah.
It. Yeah.
I did. You mean with mine?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, his is a great book, a lot of information, but much more straightforward. as you know from reading the Well-Fed Self-Publisher, I have fun with my stuff. I
Yes.
joke around, but it's still very substantive. And there's a lot of meat in there. And so, and mine is also very lots and lots of stories, firsthand stories, things that happened to me. And so I just took a different approach. And just the title itself, The Well-Fed Writer, is, there's some whimsy there. I'm having a good time.
He's not like the starving artist.
No,
Okay.
exactly right.
Okay, we often think of marketing as something that starts after we finished our book. But in your mind, when does that marketing process really start?
And that's the thing. And people have this idea, okay, my book's done. Now I got to start marketing. Well, you really need to start marketing before you even start writing the book, in the sense that you need to know whether there's a market, for a book like yours. And that's why, like I was saying in the last question, that's why I went to the bookstore first and said, okay, what's out there on commercial freelancing? And there was only one other book. So I said, okay, there's plenty of room. Well, what if you find out there's 20 books on your subject? Does the world need a 21st? Wouldn't you rather know that now, before you start writing the thing, or before you start getting deep into it, than write it and then find out that you've got an enormous number of competitors? Now, if you do believe that the world deserves a 21st book about your subject, then what is it? What's it going to be? How's yours going to be so much better and so much different? So, the key really is, and this sounds terribly basic, but write a book that people will want to read. That seems like, well, duh, but how many books out there are people writing every year that, based on their sales anyway, nobody really wants to read? So, unless you're doing it just as a vanity project, then you're not investing any more time than it takes to load it up to Amazon, in which case, fine, you can do anything you want to. Check these things out first. Now, obviously, for something like fiction, it's a little bit different, but even fiction, if you're writing in a particular genre of fiction, are you bringing something different to the genre? Are you bringing a more compelling character, more compelling writing? Ask yourselves these questions. Don't be afraid to check out the competition, because the whole rest of the world will be, and they'll be making comparisons. So, because writing books, as you know, is it's a big job.
Yes.
And you want to make sure,
Yes, it is.
there are a lot of other things we can be doing with our time. So we want to make sure that we're spending that time, the right way. So, a good way also to get clear about a book is to do a book proposal, as if you were approaching a publisher. Because a publisher, if you brought your book to a publisher, that's what they would want to see, a book proposal. The book proposal is, I'm going to give the shorthand version here, but it's basically this is what my book is about. This is, why I wrote it. This is who my audience, I think my audience is. This is how I'm already reaching that audience. This is competition to my book, and why my book is different from theirs is, X, Y, and Z. So they want that, all laid out. Well, even if you're planning on self-publishing, it's not a bad idea to do a book proposal, because then you're going to get very clear about what's the goal of your book, who's the audience for my book, and what's the competition for my book, and that can have you change how you approach it. So those are the three: audience, features, benefits, and USP.
I think that's a great suggestion, starting with a plan, really.
Right.
Since you came out with the updated edition of the Well-Fed Self-Publisher in 2014, you've come across one more marketing principle you feel is just as important. Can you share that with us?
Yeah. I love this one. And I don't even remember. Oh, I know where I came across it. I came across it in a book called Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath. Why some ideas survive survive and others don't, or something like that. And they were not the originators of this idea, but they were employing it to make a point. And I'll introduce it by way of an explanation. Have you ever read an instruction manual that was basically incoherent?
Yes.
And that assumed far more understanding on your part than they should have. Okay? I don't think there's anybody in the world who can't relate to that. Okay? Ever been in a conversation, having a conversation in your head while you're with something, and then you say something out loud that's like a continuation of that conversation, and your friend says, "Huh?
Yes.
What are you talking about?" Okay?
Yeah.
Because you've just been talking to yourself, and then you just verbally throw something out. That's what's known as the curse of knowledge. Okay? The curse of knowledge is the actual definition, which is the inability of a greater informed person to explain something effectively to a lesser informed person. So there's the instruction manual is a perfect example. These people who write these instruction manuals, they're marinating in this stuff all day long. It's second nature to them. They understand it backwards and forwards. They can do it in their sleep. Well, I don't, you don't, nobody else does, and yet they write it that way. And so this one is, it's very important to understand when you're creating a press release or when you're creating a promotional piece for an event or something like that. Pull yourself back from it and assume you know nothing about any of this, and how would you explain it to somebody so that they would get it? And if that means being what you feel is extra, overly, excessively clear about things, then that's what you need to do. So, there's a term that I use in my book called, book blind, and my admonition is to not go book blind, which means that you're so enamored with your book because you know how much blood, sweat, and tears you invested in it, and you know how great it is, and you know that the world is just waiting for this book, but the world doesn't know any of that, okay? And you need to explain all of that to them. So, the curse of knowledge is just, it's just a reminder that whenever you're talking to a particular audience about something, make sure that pretend you're a member of that audience and you don't know anything about you or your book or anything, and how would you speak to them in that case? And really, in a lot of ways, the curse of knowledge takes in audience, and it takes in features and benefits, and it takes in USP. In some ways, it's almost an umbrella thing, because it's about talking about the things that are important to that person, not just what's important to you. So it's a really, really critical thing to always keep in your mind as you progress through that book publishing journey. So
you also talk about the idea of making it easy to do business with you. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Yeah, and this is also sort of a subset of what we're talking about, is putting yourself in the other person's shoes and not just what's important to you. So, for instance, I have in my email stationery a whole bunch of things, and because a lot of times over the years people have asked me the same question, and I realized early on, okay, this is the second time I've gotten this question. So instead of typing out a new answer every time, I save the answer that I've given the last person, and then I can just cut and paste it, which is nice, because people feel like it's a personal response, which it is, but it doesn't take as long as they might think it does. So, so one of those little things that I've saved in my stationery is if somebody emails me and says, oh, thank you so much for writing the Well-Fed Writer or the Well-Fed Publisher. I've really found it very useful and appreciate, that you wrote it and da 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 da. I will send back a little thing that says, thanks so much for the kind words. If you're so inclined, would you be willing to go over to Amazon and write a review? Here's the link, okay? Not just will you write a review and hope they're going to find their way over there and sort through it. Here's the link, okay? And as a result, well, I think part of it is because I've written some good books, but, and the Well-Fed Writer has over 100 reviews at this point, and because a lot of those, no, not necessarily a lot, but a good chunk of those are coming from people who reached out to me proactively, unsolicited, to tell me how great my book is. How many stars do you think they're going to give me when they go and write a review? Okay. So there really, it's about seizing on an opportunity and making it easy for people to do things that you were asking them to do. I have, if people go to wellfedwriter.com and click on the attention media page, I have a whole sort of online media kit, which has things like press release, sample chapters, pick photos of myself, images of the cover art, news pegs, why it's important, why this book is important. All those things, FAQs, all those things that a journalist might need to put together a story. I don't want them hunting around my site trying to find stuff, because given how busy they are, they're not going to do that. But if it's all in one place, how many times have I seen over the years a press release that I sent out recreated almost exactly word for word in an article? You could say, oh, these people are lazy. Well, they're just busy. They don't have time, and if you make it easy for them, they're gonna do it. If I'm doing an event, I've got an event coming up somewhere, and I want some colleague who's also a writer and has an audience to promote that event for me, I will send them a blurb that, as if it's coming from them, saying, my friend Peter Bowerman is going to be doing a book signing at such and such, or an event at such and such, and blah, 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 go over to this link. And so they don't have to do anything but take that and drop it into their email window and forward it along. So it's things like that. It's putting yourself in the shoes of the person of whom you are asking a favor, and saying, how can I increase the likelihood that this favor will be granted? And you do that by making it easy for them to do it. It's like if you set up systems for yourself to get things done, you're more likely to do them. So it's that simple. So that's kind of what I mean by make it easy to do business with you. So.
Okay, you're also a big fan of a different format of email signature, as well as
Yes.
a different format of the attribution paragraph at the end of the articles you write. Tell us a little bit about that.
So, typical email signature, might be, and I'm pulling this from my book here, Peter Bowerman, author, the Well-Fed Writer, and of course, you want people to know that stuff, but I would rather, be a little more proactive and start with a question. And in my case, it's like, know anyone who dreams of making a good living as a writer? So this is at the end of my, email. Steer them to wellfedwriter.com, for a free report, Why Commercial Writing by Peter Bowerman. And then I can get into, a little more. But draw them in somehow. And by saying, know anyone who dreams of being a good writer, that talks to both them, potentially, if they're in that category. And if they're not, it has them think, who do I know that, and it might be very unconscious. And I'm not going to just delude myself into thinking that the majority of people who see that email signature actually do something about it, but it's important real estate. It's something that people are looking at all the time, so you might as well make it more effective. So, and the same thing with you can do that same approach with at the end of an article that you've written. Instead of saying Peter Bowerman is a freelance commercial writer who you start with somebody who wants to make a good living as a writer, or one of my favorites is love to write but hate to starve. Go to something. So that engages people. Then it's not just because if it's just a little bio, typical bio, people are kind of accustomed to, they just tune out. Whereas this, it's more likely that they're it's a call to action is what it is, and a call to action is kind of a term for something that you're asking people to do something. At the end of any promotional copy, whatever, there's always a call to action. Pick up the phone and call us today. So fill out this card and send it in today. Cleaner, healthier skin is just a moment away, or just a stamp away, or whatever. But something that has people get up and do something.
Good. A few years back, you wrote an article that appeared in several publishing newsletters entitled "The #1 Most Powerful Book Marketing Strategy of Them All." You say the title was designed to sound a bit sensationalist,
Right.
but in fact, you feel very strong about the truth of that title. Can you share with us what this amazing strategy is, and the epiphany you had about it?
I had this epiphany, and this actually became the framing structure of the new version of the Well-Fed Self-Publisher. So, three things happened in a relatively short period of time, and actually I think I start the whole book out that way. So, the first was a review on Amazon, where the woman gave workshops on self-publishing, and she said his book has moved to the top of my recommended list. Okay, it's like, well, that's cool. And then a couple days later, I got an email. Had an email exchange with someone, and at the end of it, she says, "By the way, I should be on your payroll because I'm out selling you and your book, to everybody I'm talking to." And then the third thing happened a couple days later, where a guy got a hold of me and he said, I bought a bunch of books on self-publishing, and frankly, yours was the best, which is why I'm reaching out to you for some coaching. And he ended up getting a book title. He bought a book title from me because I do book titling. We'll talk about that in a sec. Book titling and back cover copywriting, and I do general coaching for self-publishers. And it ended up being like $1,300 worth of work. So all these three things kind of were percolating in my mind, and I thought, this is really the key, the #1 most powerful book marketing strategy of them all. And it is, and I call it my profound epiphany. It's write a really good book. Okay?
Yes.
And people go, come on, give me a break. Write a really good book. Well, of course you write a really good book. Well, no, not of course, because I can look around me and I can see a whole lot of not really good books out there. So that isn't something that people are following. But the point being that when you write a really good book, you recruit an unofficial army of salespeople who spread the word far and wide, and your marketing job is vastly easier than if you didn't write a good book. And so I say to people, if I'm doing talks, if you don't remember if you don't remember anything but this one thing that I say this whole time, it's take the time to make your book as good as it could possibly be, better than it needs to be, because when you do, it's going to be so much easier to market it because the world will help you market it. So, the well-fed writer, well, both of my books have won a number of awards, and they've kind of grown by word of mouth. That doesn't mean I don't have to do any marketing, and when I stop doing marketing, my sales do go down, no question about it. But the fact is, writing a really good book can mean making your marketing very part-time. It doesn't have to be some full-time endeavor. Whereas, and we've all seen this, these people who are out there flogging their books, they keep having to pump them up and pump them up and pump them up because they're not that good, and so they're never getting any real traction. And obviously, what is a really good book in the case of a novel? I mean, that's obviously gonna be something that you have to know what you're doing, and you have to know your craft, and you have to be good at your craft, and study the best and all that. In the case of a book like mine, is this book more useful than anything else that people can find? Is it easier to read? Is it, does it have topical information? Does it have detail? Does it spell things out? How to, not just talking, have a good press release, but actually show what a good press release is. Don't just say, do cold calling. Give people scripts to use. It's stuff like this. So yeah, I absolutely, even though the title was designed to sound like, the most powerful book, like snake oil, it was, I meant it, and that the power of it really is that. It really is that powerful. So.
Okay. Well, Peter, this has been a very informative discussion. And in closing, tell us about your various products and services and where people can find more information about them.
Okay, thank you. Well, the well-fed writer is anyone who's interested in information resources on commercial freelancing, writing for companies, which is the subject of the well-fed writer, at wellfedwriter.com, not the well-fed writer, just wellfedwriter.com, no dashes or spaces. There's a free newsletter, there's a free blog, free knowledge base, free report, plus some things I charge for, and as well as coaching and that sort of thing. At wellfedsp.com, as in self-publisher, which also links from well-fed writer. That's where you'd find the well-fed self-publisher and coaching services there. And then finally, I mentioned it earlier, I do book titling and back cover copywriting for authors of nonfiction and fiction titles through Title Tailor, like a clothes tailor, TitleTailor.com. And I encourage people, even if you're saying, hey, I don't have the money to buy a title, fine, but go visit my site to at least get ideas, because I have a bunch of samples of actual titles that I've done for people and actual samples of back cover copy, so it can give you an idea of examples of clients went, yay, love it, this is great. So kind of what you should shoot for. So and I'm at peter@wellfedwriter.com as email. So I appreciate you're having me on to share this. I love talking about stuff like this, because I think it's so important for authors to get comfortable with this, because that's going to make the difference between is their book a success, or does it flounder because they're just not, they're scared of this whole thing called sales and marketing.
Well, Peter Bowerman, thank you very much. I think this topic or this discussion is going to be very popular with our membership. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on.
Peter Bowerman he is literally a marketing authority. We're going to be having more webcasts like these in the coming weeks. I think next there'll be John Krimmer, who's the author of 1,000 Ways to Market Your Book. And we'll also be speaking with Lawrence Knorr, former MBPA president, and he'll be discussing the successes of Sunbury Press. So, if you have any suggestions or topics that you would like to explore in our webcast series or any interviews, please send me an email, and you can find my address, my email address, on the MBPA website. Thank you.